The argument is very simple. If theism, if the fine tuning of the universe is more expected under theism, and theism isn't ad hoc, then the data supports theism. Obviously, when we say more expected, we're contrasting it towards naturalism, and then we just affirm the antecedent and we follow modus ponens, sir.
If fine tuning under theism and isn't ad hoc,
if the fine tuning of the universe is more expected under theism than naturalism, and theism isn't ad hoc, then the data supports theism.
Why would we accept fine tuning under theism?
Oh, why would we expect it? Yeah, so this is very simple stuff. So presumably you and me both can admit that a rational universe, or a universe that permits rational agents, is going to be valuable, brings about certain values. Internal to the theistic theory, we have the idea that God is motivated to bring about value. So then it would be expected that God would, create a universe that permits rational agents.
Why would we expect a rational agent, to produce other rational agents if they have this power to do so, rather than just not at all?
Yeah, so the reason for that is because of something called an analogical induction, where basically we have a sample size of similar entities with who share a series of properties with God, and they share a further property. So then when we run the analogical induction, we would see that it is the case that it's more likely that God would value rational agents, because the rational minds we see tend to value rational agents. So we're licensed in affirming.
I don't know if I'm not sure about how you can extrapolate, because I feel like God is in a unique space to do so, and the rational minds that we do see are material minds, and God is an immaterial mind.
Yeah, so this type of critique, it's very simple. We just want to say that for any analogical induction, presumably, given that they're not identical, they're not going to share all the same properties. So you would agree that when we do this type of analogical induction, the analogical induction is going to allow for this type of asymmetry in properties. The only thing that would make this a weak analogical induction would be if the properties are the type of things which are relevant towards the agent's axiology. I don't grant that being material is relevant towards the agent's axiology.
I'm not sure because if we're talking about the desire to produce life, out of all the people that have ever existed as rational agents on human beings, etc., even non-human rational agents, maybe some, elderly apes, etc., out of all of them, right? I don't know what the data is on how many of them would create life if they had the opportunity to, right? Because it's not about just value. Could you value something and not create it? Because what if God valued rational agents and he was just fine with himself being the sole rational agent? There's a difference between valuing rational agents and valuing rational agents as the category, and valuing creating rational agents. And so,
but the thing here is just that.
I'm sorry, just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, I'm not sure what the data is suggesting. I don't know where the data you got that from to suggest that, most rational agents have the desire to create other rational agents.
Well, that's not what's being said. What's being said here is that most
you're not saying God has the desire to create rational agents.
No, we are saying God has the desire to create rational agents, but the data in question wasn't saying that most agents want to create life. We're saying that most rational agents we observe tend to place some type of positive moral value towards rational agents, right? And God presumably is going to be the type of agent which is omnibenevolent, such that his psychology is essentially all good. So at the very least, if we sign off on the fact that a universe that permits rational agents is more valuable.
Well, why would I think that if there is a God,
finish speaking, sir. Right? You see how it just let me get the point out. Give me 30 seconds, sir.
Okay, no problem.
So, as we can see, God is the type of agent which his psychology is essentially all good, right? If a universe that permits rational agents is valuable, insofar as there's some type of positive moral value to be held in that world, then God's psychology, it would be expected that God would find moral value in that world as well. God is perfectly rational, and he always acts on the basis of his desires. So then it just seems like God would create a world that brings about rational agents. But also, in regards to the data in question, I can actually find you a bunch of statistics on this fact, right? It seems to be the case that there's a large convergence of agents who uphold some type of positive moral value in things such as sentience and rationality. I can actually find you the statistics. Give me 1 second.
I just have a question. Why would we think God is all benevolent? Why wouldn't we think that if there is such a thing as a creator or designer,
Yeah, that's
or
analytical.
embodied mind? Wait, why would? So you're saying so just a quick question. Do you think it's more likely that a disembodied mind creator or designer is all benevolent over non-benevolent?
Do I think that's more likely? Well, even if we sign off on the fact that God isn't omnibenevolent, which that's just stipulated into terms, it seems to be that even if God isn't the type of being which is all good, we could just further the analogical induction and say that the most rational minds we see place moral value on these type of beings. So then it would be expected that God would place moral value on these type of beings. So whether or not it's more likely that an omnibenevolent being exists, we still support the conclusion that there's a mind that created the universe, but we're specifically talking about the omnibenevolent type of God concept.
Okay.
And this isn't idiosyncratic, by the way, because most classical theists would sign off on the fact that God is necessarily omnibenevolent. I think that's a property to be had of the divine nature. And if you don't have the divine nature, you're not God.
Okay. Now, if it's more likely that a God is not omnibenevolent, then would you drop your belief or your proposition in saying that this is?
Well, I think if you don't have omnibenevolence, you're necessarily not God. And just in virtue of the fact that I take what it means to be God to have the divine essence, and the divine essence is made up of multiple properties. We have the property of aseity, which just means self-sufficiency. We have the property of omniscience, which just means knowledge of all truths. We have the property of omnibenevolence, which just means you're perfectly morally good. And we have a couple other properties, such as the referent being eternal, etc.
Okay.
Right, so the definitions of God includes all of those things, right?
So all these,
but I
all
haven't
of
really
these-
heard like an adequate response yet. I'm keeping it very low down. I'm not really getting into the meta because, I don't want to, do that. I only do that for people who play on my name like question mark. So
yeah, right now I'm just trying. Right now I'm just trying to understand to the best of my ability. Sorry if I'm going a little slow, but I like to be thorough first before I attack anything. Okay. So it seems like you want to say that God having all these conditions, these auxiliary conditions, they have God has a disposition to have fine-tuned world, and
well, that's not a property that's intrinsic to being God. I think that desire is something which can be added on for independent reasons, such as the ones I motivated, right? Which is just that a role that's finely tuned brings about certain values.
Yeah,
Right?
just
For what's called ECAs.
I understand what you're saying. They're entailments. Now, I have two questions. First is, why think we have fine tuning over coarse tuning? Second, why would we think that it's expected to have fine tuning if a God values life over coarse tuning?
Yeah, so the second one would just be in virtue of the motivation. Like God having this value would be something that motivates him to act. That's pretty trivial. With the first one, I can give you examples. Like we can look at things such as the cosmological constant. There's a couple other ones. There's something to do with the baryon-photon ratio. We can talk about that if you want.
I'm not here. I didn't really hear a response to the second one. You're saying it's just trivial, and just because I just want to make it clear that I'm saying it seems as of right now there's a very limited. The way for life to exist could be a lot grander, right? You don't need to have oxygen to breathe. We could just breathe without oxygen, or when we get hit, we can have a lot more. We can have a lot more durable frame as a human body, or et cetera, et cetera. Like there's so many ways.
That's not relevant though.
Well,
I can kind of explain why
the
this
point
is
is
not relevant. If you want me to.
Are you okay? I'm just saying, if we're talking about the Goldilocks zone or whatever, or like the fundamental features of the universe such that they stay in order, is that what you're referring to in fine tuning?
No,
If we're
so
talking
you're
about
kind of
creating life,
hold on, wait.
it's
I just want to
expected that we
respond
just
to
see a lot
something.
more life going on.
So the things you do right now is you're kind of like shotgunning points and then asking me a question. So I want to respond to the point that you said, which isn't relevant. You said that presumably we could have all different kinds of life, right? But you understand that the data that we conditionalize on when we run fine tuning is just that there's ECAs in the world. There's a very specific kind of ECAs in the world. There's a very specific kind.
What's that?
Yeah, so if you read the Robin Collins account of fine tuning, he takes the relevant kind of life we're conditionalizing on to be embodied conscious agents, which are just embodied beings that interact with each other based on what they perceive as moral criteria. As long as there's one of those beings in the world, then the world is finely tuned, right? Given the epistemic probability space. Now, we can motivate the epistemic probability space by appealing to the data. So I'm just going to show you why there is fine tuning. We can look at a piece of example right here. I'm going to read it out. Give me 1 second.
Okay, so you're saying fine tuning is if there's a world with at least one ECA.
And there's a relevantly narrow range of epistemic possibilities over the constant space. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to read this out for you. We can look at the, give me 1 sec. Fine tuning. We can look at the cosmological constant. If it were off by, it seems to be 10 to the 40th power, then it seems like the universe would expand too far for stable structures to form. Embodied conscious agents need stable structures to form. I'm not a physicist. I'm just going off of this, but there's further evidence for fine-tuning, which is just Fred Hoyle did calculations. He did what's called hypothetico-deductive reasoning, where you look at entailments from certain theories, and then you look for those entailments. Then when you see those entailments, it kind of confirms the theory. He did this exact thing with fine-tuning, where he predicted something. I can actually find it if you want, but he predicted.
It just sounds like you're using like nomological. Using a nomological modal scope when we're talking about.
No, we use epistemic modality.
Yeah, but the epistemic modality is over what's nomologically possible.
I don't know what that means.
That means epistemic modality is about what we know of that is physically possible.
What it means for the epistemic modality to be what's over what's epistemically possible.
Because the epistemic modal scope is about knowledge of what could physically occur.
Yeah, but we use.
What about that?
The modality is entirely epistemic.
Is the epistemic modal scope a quantifying or domaining over what could physically occur?
Yeah, it's talking about what could physically occur, yeah.
Okay, so that's all I mean by the epistemic modal scope is over the nomological modality. That's all I mean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so when we talk about the possibilities here, we're talking about what could physically occur. Yes.
Right.
The constants.
And what could physically occur and what we know about what could physically occur is our knowledge is limited by our understanding of the nomological modal scope, right? Of the nomological laws or understanding of the current laws of physics, etc. Right?
We're concerned with.
Is that right?
We know. Yeah, probably. If you're talking about how much agents know, then yeah.
Right. And so, right. If we're talking about God and God creating a world, God can create an infinite amount of worlds or universes such that they have different laws of physics, such that they would produce ECAs under different laws of physics.
That seems to be presupposing that the laws of physics aren't these type of metaphysically weighty things, which I wouldn't grant. I hold to like divine conceptualism insofar as the laws of physics. I think that's something we can discuss. But yeah, do you have an argument for that claim?
What claim did I make that you say I don't have an argument for?
Yeah, you made the claim that God could change the laws of physics to be like any such way, right? If the laws of physics are the type of things which are metaphysically weighty, then that claim would just be straight up false because it would be metaphysically impossible to change.
I'm talking about logically possible.
Yeah, but I don't grant that God can do metaphysical impossibilities, though.
I think God can do whatever is logically possible. Is it logically possible?
I don't define omnipotence that way. I think God can do anything that's metaphysically possible.
So God cannot do anything that's logically possible. Is that correct?
There's some things that are logically possible and that God can't do, yeah.
Okay, and why is that?
Yeah, because I think the metaphysical modality governs all of reality. Obviously the metaphysical modality talks about what does and does not obtain.
And why would we think that your metaphysical understanding is the true metaphysical understanding?
That seems to be a burden shift because you made the claim
I don't have a position on what's metaphysically possible.
No, but
I don't know what you mean.
Said that God could change the values of the laws of physics.
Yeah, because it's logically possible. I was used could there was talking about logical modality, which you agree.
I don't even grant that the logical modality talks about what does and does not obtain. Like I don't grant that at all. I think if you want to do that, you should appeal to metaphysical modality.
Right. So the question
is,
you're saying you made the claim it's metaphysically impossible for God not to produce worlds that are not of this world's physical laws, etc., or physical understanding. Now, just like, what's the argument for that, please?
I didn't say it was metaphysically impossible. I just said that I don't grant that God can do metaphysical impossibilities, right? Which is something that majority of Christians would sign off on.
So are you agnostic? Are you agnostic that God can produce worlds with different physical laws?
At least in the sense that he could actually make this thing obtain and be instantiated in the actual world, right? I think that if it's the case that these type of things are metaphysically impossible, then in the metaphysical modality governs what does and does not obtain, then it seems like God wouldn't be able to do this in actuality, of course, right? Whether or not it's logically possible doesn't matter. But the question on the table here is just, is it the case that this thing is metaphysically possible? I don't grant that. I hold to a version of divine conceptualism about the nomological laws. At least I'm kind of suspending my judgment on whether or not the logical laws are the type of things which are metaphysically weighty. It seems like if they were metaphysically weighty, that would cohere more with the divine conceptualist account. But I just want an argument in favor of the proposition that these type of things are not metaphysically weighty.
I'm not even understanding. I didn't suggest. Did I suggest that they were?
You suggested that these type of things are the type of things which God could change. If by that you just mean it's logically possible, that's fine. I don't grant that God can do all logical possibilities. So then it just seems like that doesn't serve as an objection to the argument. If you're making a claim that God can actually instantiate this in the actual world, then that seems like a claim which we need justification for.
Okay, so then I would just need you to explain why it's not true that this thing is not something God can do.
Well, that's going to be a burden shift. Do you want to conclude?
All I'm saying is it's logically possible, right? I didn't make a further claim.
That serves as something which is...
All I said is it's logically possible. You made the claim God cannot do all things logically possible, that there's some metaphysically impossible things that God cannot do, and yet those are logically possible. So therefore, right, I need you to give an analysis of the metaphysical modal scope, tell me what the metaphysical laws, and tell us why those are the things that are actually, action guiding over God.
Yeah, you're kind of confused, right? The point here is just that you made the claim that God could do this. If it's the case that you're not making the claim that God would be able to instantiate it in the actual world, then the point there is irrelevant towards the fine-tuning argument, right? So are you saying that the claim there is irrelevant? Because it seems like that's what you're saying.
Look, let me ask a clarifying question to that question. Or maybe it's not to that question, but for this discussion. Is that, do you think prior to creation that there was any metaphysical laws?
Duh, but this is irrelevant, or that's not an answer to the question I asked you.
No, I know, but that answer.
Nor was that a clarity question, because
that helped me understand the discussion a bit more. Now, please re-ask the question.
Yeah, the question here is, it seems to be that if you're saying God, it's just logically possible for God to do these things, right? That just seems irrelevant towards the fine-tuning argument, both as an internal critique and as an external critique, because I don't see how externally that's going to serve as something which targets the fine-tuning argument. It doesn't seem like that serves as some type of attacking relation, right? And attacking relations are just normative. They talk about reasons to reject a theory. So now that's out the way, right? I don't know why you're laughing, sir.
I'm laughing because Kylo typed it and you said it. It's just that's not laughing.
That's exactly what happened. Now, to be very clear, do you have an argument in favor of the proposition that this observation that you made, which is that it's logically possible, do you have an argument that that's even relevant towards the conversation?
Yeah, because we're talking about what God can do in terms of when He produces a world.
By relevant here, to be very clear, by relevant, I just mean that it serves as some type of attack relation towards the argument.
Because
your question now is not going to be like something which is acceptable if it doesn't serve as an attack relation.
Right, so I'm referring to whether or not there could exist worlds with ECAs in spite of their the current understanding of our physical laws, right? Because the current understanding of our physical laws, right, it could be in such a way that the current understanding of physical laws could change over time, or that if God wanted to create a different world with different physical laws or different understandings of physical laws or different occurrences of what occurs, different things of what occur when you interact with the physical world.
I don't grant that, by the way.
Then I think in these worlds, it's just possible that these worlds could exist. And you're saying it's metaphysically impossible, and I haven't heard any metaphysical. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything about
agnostic on the first order verdict in regards to the metaphysical impossibility. Now, that out the way, right? It seems to be the case that you're appealing to say that the laws can change. I think the laws of physics are the type of things which have this type of stable structuralization insofar as the stable identity relations. So I don't grant that they can change. We can talk about that if you want. I think they necessarily are the types of things which are stable.
Are you a realist when it comes to laws?
Again, I told you that I think they're metaphysically weighty, sir, which would imply that I'm a realist, yes.
Okay. Why would we think that's true?
Now, Yeah, the reason why I think that's true is just we can run an abductive case for divine conceptualism, which is just the hypothesis that the laws are going to be these type of things which are conceptualized by God and then actualized in the real world. We can run an abductive case for this. It seems like the contrastive hypothesis, which is obviously going to just be something like humanism about the laws of nature, or the laws of physics. It seems to be the case that those type of hypotheses don't adequately provide us some type of reason as to why there's going to be this type of unity in the way that we look at the laws. Not only does it seem like that doesn't provide an adequate explanation as to why there's this type of unity, that's going to mean that the divine conceptualist hypothesis, when we do an abductive analysis, is going to have these type of higher explanatory scope insofar as the relevant amount of data it can explain, which is something that you want insofar as your the best theories, right? You want type of theories which have a higher explanatory scope. So that's one theoretical virtue that divine conceptualism fulfills. I think it's also far more... it seems like it's also going to have a better explanation of why it seems to be the case that the laws are consistent. Not only that, but it seems like it's also going to be the best explanation for the uniformity of nature, sir. But you are losing this debate.
You're saying best because it has more explanatory power and
explanatory scope, yeah, and breadth, yeah, and it's more proofy, yeah.
And breadth, and breadth means what? Like it covers more.
Yeah, it covers more. Yes.
Okay, so it has more explanatory scope. It has more breadth. And there was a third
thing. At least compared to the contrastive naturalistic explanations for the laws of physics, yeah.
And the third thing,
but you are losing
because... Did you have a third thing?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, and why
it also is the best explanation for the consistency.
Why do we... Okay, so you said consistency, that's the third thing?
Yeah, the uniformity of nature, yeah.
Why do we think that these three things are the sufficient conditions for the view to be more abductive or better explanation?
Well, it's just trivial that these are theoretical virtues, but I can explain why you care about these theoretical virtues.
I'm not saying nobody cares about them or anything like that. I'm not asking you why would I care about them. I'm asking why is it such a way that these
what do you think theoretical virtues are?
I'm sorry. Why would you think that these theoretical virtues, one valued, outweigh others?
I didn't say they outweigh others. That's confusing.
So if they're not outweighing the others, which I imagine that the others that you didn't list, that this argument would win on, right? You didn't list them because they don't apply to this argument or this proposition.
That's not true, by the way. I don't know why you're doing this weird thing where you try to psychologize, which is fine.
Okay, so if they do
think that these
tell
things
me
are
which
the type
they
of
do.
things which, if you think that these things are going to be the type of things which isn't valued, they're trivially valued in philosophy.
They're not valued.
Okay, so then what's the critique?
Things can be valued and still not outweigh other things that are valued that the proposition doesn't hold, right?
Wait, but what's the critique though?
I'm asking for the argument as to why, even if these are the things that are included in the argument, why that means that it's an argument that leads to the conclusion that's the best explanation, right?
Because when you motivate abductive virtues, obviously that's going to mean that your theory has more things you want in terms of explanations, right? Now, if we look at the things that we want in terms of explanations, divine conceptualism in regards to the laws of nature obviously are going to be the type of things which are satisfied. And not only that, but the explanatory power, scope, and breadth are some of the theoretical virtues that are used in the inference to the best explanation. And when evaluating these type of competing theories, you're naturally going to look for the best explanation of the relevant data. Theoretical virtues are just things that make a theory explain phenomena well.
I understand. That's not what I'm asking about. I'm not saying do theoretical virtues inform what makes something the best explanation. I'm just saying
it's unclear what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it clear. The point is that there are multiple theoretical virtues. Unless you're saying that your argument or your proposition takes the advantage in every theoretical virtue, if you're not saying that, then my question is very clear. Why is it true that even if it is true that your proposition or argument has these non-encapsulating of all theoretical virtues, even if they have these few theoretical virtues, why is that more valuable than the theoretical virtues that the alternative case has? That's the question.
I don't grant that humanism satisfies a bunch of the theoretical virtues.
I didn't say anything about a bunch or anything like that. I'm just saying, do you think...
I don't even grant that it satisfies any. But look, okay. I think we can kind of conclude...
So if it doesn't satisfy any, are you saying that your view satisfies all theoretical virtues?
That's not... Wait, you think me saying I don't grant that humanism satisfies any theoretical virtues entails that my theory somehow satisfies all of them?
If it entailed it, that's...
But then why are you asking that question?
Because I'm asking if you believe that.
No, but that question doesn't matter. Look, if we just reflect back on the debate, listen, I just want to be very clear. If we just reflect back on this debate, you've done this tactic where you just ask 20 questions and not actually engage with the points being made. If we ask ourselves, how many relevant defeaters has Hatim levied to the proposition on the table? There's zero. If we ask ourselves how many type of defense relations has he kind of engaged with on the table, there's absolutely zero. I've met my burden of proof. I put you on a burden to be joined in certain areas in this debate, and you failed to actually motivate.
But just to be clear, you're saying don't you think?
Not only that, but I gave you an argument for fine tuning. I explained why it's more expected. I gave you the analogical induction. Not only did I give you the analogical induction, I gave you some reason as to why I don't think the laws are going to be the type of things which are not metaphysically weighty. I did all of that and
just to be clear,
critique. So I think we can end the discussion here, Matt.
Just to be clear, don't isn't the humane account of laws, doesn't it have less?
Yeah, I think we can conclude.
Whatever, whatever. Doesn't it have less ontology?
Yo, what? Did he just fucking leave?
Okay, he wants to leave.
Kylo, tell Cap to get back in here. If they don't want to do, if he doesn't want to take his closer, he doesn't have to. But I'm giving his team a closer.
Look,
I'm giving both debaters a closer if he doesn't come back. Like, I'm gonna invite. Yeah, team, you get 3 minutes to close, and then Cap can join up whenever if he wants.
He said it's more abductive.
Look,
if there's a question that's not sufficiently answered and a proposition that's not sufficiently given what a proposition, if there's an open question that any opponent has not answered, right, then that means there's a break in the chain in their lines of justification to reach the conclusion that is in limbo. And unless that chain is joined, then nobody can say that they have justified their conclusion. And so one of these our interactions between us, right, is it actually the case that his realist account is abductive? And he listed 3 things, I believe it was scope and simplicity or something like that, or not simplicity. I forgot what it was. It was 3 things. I forgot to write them down. But either way, my response to that was, okay, well, what about the things that, on the other hand, the alternative view, the anti-realist position or the human position, what about their virtues? And he was like, oh, I don't grant that. Okay, and we didn't even get to the part where I was trying to say to him, okay, that the human view posits less ontology. It's less weighty in that way. There's less type ontology from the human perspective. And so that's a theoretical virtue. It's parsimonious in that sense. So the question would be, why would we value these others theoretical virtues over parsimony?
Are you conceding the rest of your time?
Right, and yeah, sure. I mean, this whole time,
want to take your last
I'm trying to, just to be clear, I'm trying to understand Capp's view for me to refute it. I mean, at best, I think so far it's, what do you call it? It's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's inconclusive, this debate, because we didn't get to the point where I'm understanding it. Obviously, 25 minutes, especially when I'm discussing something like this in 25 minutes, it's going to be hard for me to understand everything that Capp's view is saying, because this honestly is even my first time hearing that somebody having a definition of God in a way that doesn't include everything logically possible, that this is something God can do. So obviously there's going to be some time that's going to take in 25 minutes for me to understand, and it's not going to be covering everything. So at best, I think the debate's inconclusive. But that's it, yeah.
All right, you can see the rest of your time. Cap, you get your 3 minutes, and now you get big screen 2.
Yeah, so I wish I was able to steelman his objections like Kylo said in the chat, but he unfortunately didn't levy any objections. Not only did he not levy any objections, I'm pretty sure I pressed him multiple times to give me arguments for certain claims, or he didn't give me an argument for it. That's going to be in the recording when this gets posted. Not only that, but he made the claim that if there's a question which is not sufficiently answered, that shows that there's some type of break in the line of reasoning of your opponent, which is not necessarily the case, right? Because you can ask these type of irrelevant questions. You can ask these type of questions which are not acceptable. And by not acceptable, if you read Young Abstract Theory of Argumentation, the acceptability conditions for a question in a dialectic is whether or not it's going to be provide some type of attack relation. And attack relations are the kinds of things where, one, if it's normative, it's epistemically normative, and then 2, it gives you reasons to reject a theory. I don't grant that majority of the questions he was asking me admitted some type of attacking relation in the dialectic. Again, I just want to run a little experiment for the chat. If we ask ourselves, how many arguments did I give? I gave multiple supplementary arguments, right? I gave him an argument in favor of the proposition that the existence of God is more probable. I gave him an argument in favor of the proposition that God would desire fine-tuning. I gave him an argument in favor of the proposition that God has these type of supplementary auxiliaries within the hypothesis. I also gave him an argument in favor of the proposition that the type of laws of physics are going to be the type of things which are metaphysically weighty in this sense. And if we ask ourselves, well, if that's all the arguments I gave, how many arguments did Hatim give? And the question there just seems to be zero. Like, he didn't give me an argument for any claim. All he did was ask me questions. He asked me a bunch of questions which I don't think were relevant. He didn't really get to the point where he gave me some type of defeater. So just based on the standard debate norms, right, I met my dialectical obligation to prove my claims, and he failed to meet his dialectical obligation to disprove my claims, which is something called the Bernoulli rejoinder, which I don't think is talked about enough. The arguments were very simple, right? We did the analogical induction for the desires. We did this type of abductive case for the laws of physics being the type of things which are metaphysically weighty. And yeah, I mean, they were in the chat saying that I didn't successfully answer his questions. I answered a bunch of his questions, and a lot of them were going to be the type of things which didn't even critique the argument. Right? I think if you're asking questions and those questions don't critique the argument, or they don't do anything for the dialectic besides ask you to prove a claim, I don't really think they're the type of things which are relevant, right? And yeah, I think I won this debate, man. Just in virtue of the fact that I met my burden of proof, and Hatim failed to meet his burden rejoinder, man. So yeah.